The story of Stacy Hunucker is, on its surface, a classic portrait of American small-town life. Mount Holly, North Carolina, with its quiet streets and close-knit community, was the backdrop she called home. Here, she built a life that appeared to be the fulfillment of a simple, cherished dream. She was married to Joshua, her high school sweetheart, a connection that spoke of longevity and deep-rooted commitment. Together, they were raising two young daughters, Piper and Willow, and photographs from this time show a woman whose smile seemed genuine, whose presence was a comfort. Stacy was deeply embedded in the fabric of her community. Her professional life was dedicated to nurturing children, first at First Baptist Charlotte and later at other preschools and the local YMCA. Colleagues and parents knew her as patient, creative, and profoundly kind. Outside of work, her life revolved around family and faith. She was a lifetime member of the Mount Holly United Methodist Church, where she participated in various groups. Her personal joys were similarly grounded, crafting painted wooden signs, going to the beach, watching sports, and, most of all, documenting her daughters' lives through pictures. To every external observer, friends, family, neighbors, the Hunucker household represented stability and contentment. Joshua's career as a flight paramedic with Atrium Health's MedCenter Air carried a badge of respect and heroism, further burnishing the family's image. They were the couple others pointed to, the young family that seemed to have it all figured out. This impeccable image, however, would become the most effective camouflage. It disarmed suspicion and framed every future tragedy as a cruel twist of fate rather than a deliberate act. The very normalcy of their life, the cookouts with friends, the church activities, the softball games of their youth, created a narrative so powerful that it would take years and unimaginable persistence to see past it. In this world, Stacy was the center, the glue, the heart, the smiling face in every photograph. The idea that danger could be living alongside her, sharing her bed, and helping to raise her children was unthinkable. This perfect picture was the first layer of a story that would slowly, agonizingly, peel back to reveal something entirely different. The first crack in the idyllic veneer appeared not with drama, but with a whisper of unease in February 2013. Shortly after the birth of her first daughter, Piper, Stacy began experiencing vague but alarming health issues. The symptoms were elusive, yet debilitating. Episodes of severe fatigue, dizziness, and weakness. Doctors were initially perplexed, struggling to find a root cause for a young, seemingly healthy woman's decline. Then, in July of that same year, external catastrophe struck. A devastating fire engulfed the family's home, reducing their possessions to ashes and leaving them emotionally and financially vulnerable. A GoFundMe campaign, launched by a friend to help them rebuild, would inadvertently become a public diary of Stacy's private medical nightmare. The entries tracked a harrowing journey. In November 2014, after the birth of her second daughter, Willow, Stacy was admitted to the hospital with a dangerously low heart rate and blood pressure, requiring a stay in the intensive care unit. Tests were run, but answers were not found. The doctors were still stumped as to what was going on, one update read. The crisis escalated in January 2015. Readmitted for cardiac issues, Stacy suffered a full cardiac arrest in her hospital room. Her heart stopped. Medical teams resuscitated her and placed her on a ventilator, fighting to stabilize her as the mystery deepened. The solution, arrived at the following month, was drastic and shocking for a woman of 29. Surgeons implanted a pacemaker. For Stacy's family and friends, it was a terrifying but accepted explanation, a rare, profound heart condition. The medical debt mounted, adding a layer of constant financial stress to the emotional toll. The pattern was a relentless cycle of crisis, hospitalization, recovery, and fear, with no underlying diagnosis ever provided. Looking back with hindsight, each symptom, the bradycardia, the hypotension, the sudden cardiac arrest, perfectly aligns with the effects of tetrahydrozoline poisoning. But at the time, trapped within the narrative of a complex cardiac patient, Stacy was in a maze with no exit. Her husband, Joshua, by her side, through every hospital visit and consultation, presented the concerned, supportive partner. His medical expertise as a flight paramedic was seen as an asset, a source of knowledge and advocacy. No one considered that the same expertise could provide a roadmap, not for curing illness, but for simulating it. The evening of September 23, 2018, began like any other in the Hunucker household. There was no forewarning, no final crisis that prompted a frantic rush to the hospital. Instead, the end came in the living room of their Mount Holly home. It was Joshua who made the 911 call, his voice reporting the unthinkable. He had found his wife, unresponsive, slumped over the side of their couch. When first responders arrived, they were met with a scene that, while tragic, presented a clear clinical picture. A 32-year-old woman with a documented and severe cardiac history, a pacemaker, prior arrests, repeated hospitalizations, was in full arrest. Protocols were followed. Life-saving measures were administered, and she was rushed to the hospital. But Stacy Robinson Hunucker could not be revived. For the local police officers who responded, the cause of death was evident. They saw a young mother whose body had succumbed to the very condition that had plagued her for 5 years. There were no signs of a struggle, no overt indications of foul play. Joshua's account of the evening, though it would later prove fluid, initially seemed plausible. He had stepped away for a moment and returned to find her. Given Stacy's extensive medical records, the ruling was swift and logical. Natural causes, specifically cardiac arrest. The case was closed almost as soon as it was opened, filed away as another sad, premature death. This official conclusion provided a powerful shield. It validated the narrative of Stacy's long illness and gave a name to the family's grief. For authorities, it was a straightforward, if tragic, paperwork conclusion. For Joshua, it was the intended outcome of a long, calculated plan. The natural death ruling was the keystone that would allow everything else to fall into place. The financial claims, the rapid closure, the ability to move forward without the shadow of an investigation. It was the final medical note on a chart half a decade in the making, a period during which, investigators would later allege, Stacy's body was being used as a testing ground to make this very moment appear inevitable. In the raw, disorienting hours following a sudden loss, human behavior is unpredictable, governed by shock and deep sorrow. But Joshua Hunucker's actions in the days after Stacy's death followed a distinct, methodical pattern that stood in stark contrast to the chaos of grief. The first and most critical decision he made was to refuse an autopsy. He was adamant, even forceful, in this refusal. This was highly unusual, particularly for a 32-year-old whose cause of death, while presumed, had not been definitively proven by a medical examiner. His insistence blocked the standard procedure that could have revealed the truth. With the autopsy waived, the next steps proceeded with startling speed. Within 48 hours of her death, Stacy's body was cremated. In the world of funeral arrangements, this is exceptionally fast. Families typically need time to gather, to mourn, to make decisions. The immediate cremation served one irreversible purpose. It destroyed the physical evidence of Stacy's body forever. No future exhumation or examination would be possible. Concurrently, in that same 2-day window, Joshua Hunucker formally filed claims on 2 life insurance policies held in Stacy's name. He was the sole beneficiary on both, one for $200,000 and another for $50,000. The paperwork was initiated before Stacy's funeral had even been planned. These 3 actions, blocking an autopsy, immediate cremation, and instant insurance claims, formed a triad of practical, self-interested moves. They were administrative tasks executed with efficiency, not the paralyzed, hesitant actions of a grieving spouse. Furthermore, when it came to the emotional and ceremonial duty of laying Stacy to rest, Joshua distanced himself. The funeral was arranged and paid for not by the widower, but by Stacy's heartbroken parents, John and Susie Robinson. Joshua's participation was described as detached, as if he were an attendee rather than the chief mourner. While a family struggled to comprehend their loss, Joshua was systematically removing barriers to his financial gain and eliminating forensic evidence, all while outsourcing the burdens of grief and ceremony. The sequence was a clinical to-do list for someone closing a chapter, not a man shattered by the loss of his life partner. The months following Stacy's death revealed not a household in mourning, but one undergoing a swift and jarring transformation. The most intimate witness to this change was the family's babysitter, Kaylin. Hired to help care for Piper and Willow, she had a front-row seat to the new dynamic. What she observed and later recounted to investigators was a profound absence of grief. She stated she never saw Joshua express sadness. He did not cry. He did not speak of Stacy, share memories of her with his daughters, or appear burdened by her loss. Instead, a palpable sense of relief, even happiness, filled the home. The source of this shift was Jennifer, a colleague of Joshua's, who was now a constant presence. Kaylin described the couple as all over each other all the time, openly discussing plans for a future together, plans that involved buying a new home and starting fresh. Jennifer had moved into the house Joshua shared with Stacy, occupying the space where Stacy had lived and died. It was, as Kaylin noted, as if Stacy had been seamlessly replaced, her memory actively erased from the daily life of her own family. This behavior extended beyond the home. Joshua's colleagues at MedCenter Air expressed their own concerns to authorities. They were alarmed by how quickly and openly he had moved on with his new relationship, a pace they found disrespectful and deeply suspicious. The man they worked with appeared unfazed, his life not interrupted but accelerated by his wife's passing. This new life was bankrolled by the $250,000 in insurance proceeds. The spending was conspicuous and celebratory. Joshua purchased a luxury boat, a vessel valued between $80,000 and $100,000. He and Jennifer embarked on multiple vacations, trips that would have been financially impossible under the weight of Stacy's medical debt. He paid off the mortgage on the family home. Each purchase was a step away from the past, and an investment in a future Stacy was never meant to see. The contrast was devastating. A vibrant young mother was gone, and in her place was a boat, a paid-off mortgage, and a new girlfriend discussing kitchen renovations. The performance of grief was entirely absent, replaced by the tangible rewards of her death. For Susie Robinson, the official story of a natural death never resonated. A mother's intuition, that deep, nagging sense of wrongness, gnawed at her. The pieces of the puzzle, which authorities had dismissed as separate fragments, began to connect in her mind with chilling clarity. The rapid insurance claim, filed with unseemly haste, the absolute refusal to allow an autopsy, a move that blocked any chance for answers, the immediate cremation that felt like a rush to destroy something, the new girlfriend who seemed to materialize from the shadows, now living in her daughter's home, and underpinning it all, the years of mysterious, undiagnosed suffering that no specialist could explain. Susie saw not a series of coincidences, but a pattern. She believed her daughter had been murdered for the insurance money, to free Joshua from a marriage and its crushing debt, allowing him to pursue a new life with Jennifer. Armed with this conviction and the tangible evidence of the financial red flags, Susie took a step that would change the course of everything. In May 2019, 8 months after Stacy's death, she formally contacted the North Carolina Department of Insurance. She filed a detailed report alleging fraud against her son-in-law. This was not a casual complaint. It was a mother's act of defiance against a closed case and a narrative she knew was false. Her report moved the case from the realm of personal suspicion into the arena of official scrutiny. The department's Criminal Investigations Division received the referral. Initially, they were reviewing a file marked natural death by local police, but fraud investigators are trained to follow the money and question inconsistencies. Susie Robinson's allegations provided the catalyst, the human reason to look deeper. She provided the why, insurance fraud, which gave investigators the legal framework to subpoena records, interview witnesses, and reconstruct the financial timeline. Without this specific, courageous filed allegation, the case likely would have remained a tragic medical file. Susie's action demonstrated that the most powerful force in an investigation is sometimes not forensic technology, but a loved one's relentless refusal to accept a lie. She forced open a door that had been firmly shut, allowing a new light to shine on every strange detail of the past 5 years. The official investigation, now underway, faced an immediate and seemingly insurmountable hurdle. Stacy's body had been cremated. All physical evidence was presumed lost. Without a body, a homicide case typically collapses. However, the investigative team discovered a procedural miracle. Because Stacy had registered as an organ donor, the LifeShare donor network had followed standard protocol before her cremation. Part of that protocol involved drawing and preserving a vial of the donor's blood for compatibility testing. This single vial, stored for a routine administrative purpose, had survived. It was the one piece of evidence Joshua Hunucker had not accounted for, could not have destroyed without raising immediate flags. Investigators secured this vial and sent it for toxicological analysis. A standard screen, which looks for common drugs, narcotics, and poisons, came back negative. This initial result could have been the end of the line, but the insurance fraud angle and the mother's suspicions prompted them to dig deeper. They requested a comprehensive, advanced toxicology panel, a broader net cast to catch more obscure substances. The results were unequivocal and shocking. Stacy's blood contained a massive concentration of tetrahydrozoline, the active decongestant in over-the-counter eye drops like Visine. The level was not just elevated, it was 30 to 40 times higher than a standard therapeutic dose. This amount could not result from accidental ingestion or misuse of eye drops. It was a concentration indicative of deliberate, significant poisoning. Forensic toxicologists explained that tetrahydrozoline, when ingested, is a potent cardiovascular depressant. It causes exactly the symptoms that defined Stacy's medical ordeal: dangerously slowed heart rate, plummeting blood pressure, and eventual cardiac arrest. For someone with a pacemaker, it would be particularly lethal. Crucially, tetrahydrozoline is not part of a routine autopsy toxicology screen. Unless a medical examiner is specifically looking for it, prompted by suspicion, it will go undetected. The preserved blood vial was the key that unlocked the entire mystery. It transformed Stacy's death from a natural tragedy tragedy into a homicide. It provided the scientific proof that aligned with Susie Robinson's instincts and the investigators' growing suspicions about motive and behavior. This small glass tube, intended to facilitate the gift of life, ultimately became the instrument of justice for a life stolen. With the forensic proof of poisoning in hand, investigators began constructing the how and the why. The method tetrahydrozoline was revealing in itself. It pointed to a killer with specific knowledge. Joshua Hunucker, a flight paramedic since 2013, possessed exactly that knowledge. His training and daily work required a detailed understanding of pharmacology, toxicology, and human physiology. He knew how substances affected the heart. He would have understood dosing, symptoms, and crucially, that this particular poison was unlikely to be detected in standard medical tests. His employment also provided access to medical supplies. The investigation uncovered something even more damning: prior statements. Two of Joshua's former co-workers told authorities that, before Stacy's death, Joshua had remarked that if he ever wanted to kill someone, he would use Visine or similar eye drops. This was not a casual joke. It was a specific statement of methodology from a medical professional. Then, investigators found the potential catalyst. Just weeks before Stacy's death, on August 31, 2018, a case exploded in the local news. A nurse named Lana Sue Clayton in South Carolina was arrested for poisoning her husband by putting eye drops in his water. The method and the arrest were widely reported across the Charlotte media market. The timeline was compelling. The Clayton case provided a public, detailed blueprint.
Joshua, with his medical knowledge, his prior contemplation of the method, and his clear motive, escaping debt and his marriage to be with Jennifer, now had a working model delivered to him by the news. Prosecutors would later allege that Joshua, seeing this news, implemented the method at home. The motive was now fully illuminated. It was a confluence of financial desperation from years of medical bills, the emotional pull of a new relationship, and the opportunity presented by Stacy's already fragile health. His expertise made him capable. The insurance policies made it profitable. The news story provided the final piece of operational guidance. The perfect storm had formed, and on September 23, 2018, it struck. Joshua Hunucker's arrest for first-degree murder in December 2019 was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new, more reckless chapter. He posted a $1.5 million bond and was released on Christmas Eve. Free, but facing trial, his behavior grew increasingly desperate and dangerous. He initiated a systematic campaign of intimidation against Stacy's parents, John and Susie Robinson. He photographed and filmed them at their grandchildren's sporting events. He sent packages to their home demanding they drop the case. He followed their car and repeatedly drove past their house. The harassment was overt, designed to terrify and exhaust them. Then, in February 2023, he staged an elaborate fabrication. He filed a police report claiming he had been kidnapped, pistol-whipped, and injected with an unknown substance by a man he identified as John Robinson. He claimed he was left zip-tied. The Mount Holly police investigated thoroughly. They found no evidence, no witnesses, no forensic support, no credibility to any part of his story. They determined the entire kidnapping was a hoax, a transparent attempt to frame his father-in-law and shift suspicion away from himself. Weeks after this failed stunt, Joshua's 11-year-old daughter was hospitalized with a serious medical scare. Tests confirmed the presence of tetrahydrozoline in her system. Joshua, at the hospital, suggested to doctors she must have gotten into eye drops. Medical staff found this an unreasonable leap. Prosecutors allege he poisoned his own child in a monstrous attempt to make it appear the grandparents were trying to harm the children, thereby removing them from his life and influencing the custody battle. This act led a judge to find he had abused and neglected his children. His bond was revoked in November 2024, and he was returned to jail. Separately, it was revealed that just before his murder arrest, he had set a small fire on a medical helicopter mid-flight, forcing an emergency landing, an act of staggering recklessness. Out on bond, Joshua Hunucker showed a propensity for chaos, fabrication, and violence, directly targeting the family of the woman he was accused of killing. As of now, the case of Stacy Robinson Hunucker awaits its final chapter in a courtroom. Joshua Hunucker remains in the Gaston County Jail, held without bond. A trial, delayed by the complexity of the post-arrest offenses, is pending. The legal process grinds forward, seeking to hold him accountable for first-degree murder, insurance fraud, arson, witness intimidation, and child abuse. But beyond the courtroom, other battles continue. Stacy's daughters, Piper and Willow, now teenagers, have been removed from their father's care. Their maternal grandparents, parents, John and Susie Robinson, are engaged in a persistent fight for permanent custody, striving to provide stability and keep their daughter's memory alive for the girls she loved so deeply. This case stands as a stark testament to several powerful forces. It highlights the irreplaceable role of a family's love and tenacity. Without Susie Robinson's unwavering instinct and courage to file that fraud report, there would be no investigation. It demonstrates the importance of procedural diligence. That single vial of blood, preserved for organ donation, was the definitive piece of evidence that turned suspicion into proof. And it is a chilling reminder that evil often wears the most familiar face. Stacy's story is not just one of victimhood, but of a life lived with joy and purpose. She is remembered not as a case file, but as a smiling, crafty, dedicated teacher and mother who loved the beach, her church, and capturing moments with her girls. The pursuit of justice for Stacy is, ultimately, a fight to ensure that the bright truth of her life overwhelms the darkness of her death. Her family's statement echoes this resolve: "We will not rest until justice is served." Their fight ensures that Stacy Robinson Hunucker will be remembered for who she was, and not just for the calculated way she was taken.